Wiener immigrated to the United States in the late 19th century on his way to British Honduras, where he planned to open a vegetarian commune. Well, when that turned out not to be the dream job he expected, he moved back to the United States and he became a professor at Harvard University, as one does. But in his time in Mesoamerica, he started noticing things. There are lots of things that led him to encounter certain discoveries that made him consider that possibly if the origins of American civilization might actually be in Africa. So he observed so many linguistic and botanical and other similarities that between 1920 and 1922, he published an extensive 3-volume piece called Africa and the Discovery of America.
All right, racists, we're going to address this again since the inferior people are struggling. Black Americans are the only indigenous people on this land. Melanated people are the only people around the world who are indigenous on every land, no matter their ethnic group. Uncivilized lands all have the same genetic connection, melanated skin with varying shades of brown. And those groups are not connected to Africa, just like Black Americans aren't connected to Africans ethnically. The actual American Indian, known as the Black Americans, are the ethnic group of North America, not descendants of Africans. Let's dismantle the greatest public relations fraud ever committed, the desperate multiracial campaign to erase the true indigenous Black American from this land.
If you see the ancient god of Vietnamese, he's black. The ancient god of Hawaiians, he's black. The ancient god of the Indians, Vishnu, is black. The ancient god of Chinese, Buddha, is black. Are these Africans? No, European will tell you this is parallel development. And we sit around and accept this because he wants to develop his concept of white supremacy, and if he wasn't there first, then it didn't happen. You have pyramids in Egypt. You have pyramids in West Africa, and you have pyramids in Central America.
A conversation that was once whispered is now being said out loudly. And if you can see across the social media platforms, in debates, in the podcasts, some white Americans are openly acknowledging something that shakes the foundation of how America historically has been told, or has been taught to many people, including myself. It's not a self-hate, it's just a realization. They're realizing that what they were taught about the history of America is not true. So guys, I want us to watch some clips here, then we come back and have a talk as far as this topic is concerned. And of course, if you're watching for the first time, please subscribe. Let's dive straight, watch these clips, then come back and have a talk.
If you see the ancient god of Vietnamese, he's black. The ancient god of Hawaiians, he's black. The ancient god of the Indians, Vishnu, is black. The ancient god of Chinese, Buddha, is black. Are these Africans? No, European will tell you this is parallel development. And we sit around and accept this because he wants to develop his concept of white supremacy, and if he wasn't there first, then it didn't happen. You have pyramids in Egypt. You have pyramids in West Africa. And you have pyramids in Central America. You have those great big thick-lipped, big-nosed megaliths in the Ivory Coast. And you have them in the Olmec civilization here. But did they cross the ocean? No, because Columbus discovered America. So, if everything around the equatorial belt is black and black culture and tropical people, why? How can we possibly believe that they went all the way up through Siberia and then dispersed? What is the purpose of such a stupid interpretation of the dissemination of humanity? That is how deep white supremacy goes. In the oceanic belt of the equator, what do you see? Little black people here, little black people here, little black people here, little black people. But did they go that way? Because they want to say the European was the first person to cross the Atlantic Ocean, right? Now, how difficult is it to get across the Atlantic Ocean? Well, maybe they didn't just come through the Bering Strait. Maybe they went across the Indian Ocean, which is twice as wide as the Atlantic, or the Pacific, which is 3 times as wide as the Atlantic. Rather than say Africans left the equator belt of Africa and went right across the Atlantic to Brazil. And there are no 25,000 or 30,000-year-old fossils in Canada. Rather than tell you they came across the ocean, how difficult is it to get across the Atlantic Ocean? But Europeans didn't know that Africans, ancient Egyptians, were wise enough to actually make all kinds of boats that could go across the ocean. You know, they knew all this kind of technology. So what they did, to get back to the concept of epistemology, they tell you the migration only came through the Siberian Strait, and then people reverted into these phenotypes. These assumptions we're accepting to keep the idea that there is only one way to get here. Now, here's the second thing. In Egypt, you have pyramids. The Nile was wet 7,000, 9,000 years BC. It was wet.
Alright, racists, we're gonna address this again, since the inferior people are struggling. Black Americans are the only indigenous people on this land. Melanated people are the only people around the world who are indigenous on every land, no matter their ethnic group. Uncivilized lands all have the same genetic connection. Melanated skin with varying shades of brown. And those groups are not connected to Africa, just like Black Americans aren't connected to Africans, ethnically. The actual American Indian, known as the Black Americans, are the ethnic group of North America, not descendants of Africans. Let's dismantle the greatest public relations fraud ever committed, the desperate multiracial campaign to erase the true indigenous Black American from this land. There is a coordinated effort, a relentless lie, designed to make Black Americans believe they are a guest in someone else's house. But the unchangeable, archaeological, and historical truth is that Black Americans are the foundation. They were here first. And by here, I mean the world. Every country. Every strip of land. And they built the civilization that we are all destroying. The lie about Africa is to confuse and mislead so that the theft can keep going on. Black Americans weren't even considered African American until 1988 by Jesse Jackson, a known Cherokee Indian. So they'll pay a Black American leader to lie and sell out, while classifying himself correctly despite the lie. If Black Americans came from Africa by boat in the 1600s, America didn't figure this out until 1988? And this isn't just a white lie. This is a lie woven by $5 pretendians, by secret treaties between immigrant groups, by decades of policy and propaganda all aimed at one single goal, convincing the world that the original people of this soil simply do not exist. They have every story in the world about the false history. And then you ask for ship manifest and evidence of ships, and then suddenly they can't produce them. But they could show you evidence of the Titanic hundreds of feet under the ocean. They won't even show you the entirety of the Titanic under the water. Only a corner of this ship. They still parse that history. They have reclassified the true indigenous people, renamed you, and redrawn maps around you, hoping you would forget the land your spirit is made from. Now they deploy their little native influencers online, armed with fraudulent petitions and digital picket signs, begging platforms to remove you from your own story. They're performing a pathetic pantomime of indigeneity. If you are indigenous, why would you need outside help? What are they protecting? If you're truly indigenous Native Americans, how could someone take that from you? Why the sudden panic? Every post they make, every petition they circulate is an admission. You've been caught, and now history will be made. Every other race are the visitors. It is time, Black Americans. Time for you to start acting like the host in your home, because all of this is yours. It is time you start acting like the host.
What if I told you the proof that Black people are the original people of this land is put right before our faces, but we never pay attention to it? Let me ask y'all this. Why is it that whenever anybody need help with a fight of theirs, they always call on Black people? Nobody really likes Black people, but they always need them. The Chinese got a country to back them. Hispanics got a country to back them. Hell, Africans got a whole damn continent to back them. But the only people in this world who have no country or no real identity, they consistently reach out to those people for help in a country that they're supposed to have no power in and don't own nothing. Animal rights movement, Black people back. The gay rights movement, Black people back. Anti-Semitic movement, Black people back. Now that things are affecting the Hispanic community, once again, Black people back it. How would 14% of the population have so much power if they wasn't the original people of their country? Why would everybody keep going to that particular community if that community is supposed to be the lowest on the totem pole? Black people, shouldn't that answer your question about who you really are? But the problem that I have with this whole situation is when Black people need anything, everybody else silent. And we gotta learn what's a good fight and what ain't. Now, I feel bad for the kids that are being affected by this, But where was all this uproar when CPS was snatching little black kids out of their homes? Where was black people's backup when the kids was being put in the system only to get lost? Wasn't y'all blaming the parents then? We get an Amber Alert damn near every week about American kids and nobody says shit. Black people still gotta teach their kids how to be black in this country just so they can live past a certain age. But you asking us for help? And see, that's another problem I have with us. We can always come together to help everybody but our damn selves. Everybody in this world see our true power but us, and that's unity. Every election, every protest, every fight that's ever been fought, everybody else know if you unite the black people behind you, you're gonna either win or at least be heard. When are we gonna unite for our own damn thing?
African Americans built this nation. We built this nation. You know, you're just starting to get real credit for that. Okay, I don't know if you know that. You're just starting to get, you built the nation. We all built it, but you were such a massive part of it. Bigger than you were given credit for. Does that make sense? Right?
Right, racists, we're going to address this again since the inferior people are struggling. Black Americans are the only indigenous people on this land. Melanated people are the only people around the world who are indigenous on every land, no matter their ethnic group. Uncivilized lands all have the same genetic connection, melanated skin with varying shades of brown. And those groups are not connected to Africa, just like Black Americans aren't connected to Africans ethnically. The actual American Indian, known as the Black Americans, are the ethnic group of North America. Descendants of Africans. Let's dismantle the greatest public relations fraud ever committed. The desperate.
Everything he said was the truth. The problem is that people don't like the truth. So they will tell you that you're delusional, you're crazy, something's wrong with you. Before they believe that, okay? Before they believe the truth, they're going to continue and do everything they can to believe that lie because it's been told for so long. And here's proof. Science shows that black people was the first people on Earth. And you might say, oh, well, that happened in Africa. Native Americans were still the first people of America. Okay, well, explain to me this, because I also said that in the last video about how our libraries with only our history, not African history, only our history was burned down in America. But they were made, those same libraries were made pre-colonization. So I'm trying to figure out, why did y'all burn them down? And why were they there before we got there? That doesn't make any sense. I thought we were from Africa and we came on a boat.
Africans don't call themselves that because I know my tribe. I have my language. I have my region, my country, my whatever. Like me saying European American. I'm not European. I'm specifically Irish and German. But you can't say that. You are American. You're the original Americans. You know? Everyone else is immigrants. You can't even be called immigrants. Yeah. You know, you're originally American, and your culture is as close to being the indigenous culture of America as there can be without you being the indigenous people. You know, you're the indigenous people of the entity called America, called the United States of America. Everything else came from elsewhere. Your culture is the only one that came from right there. Because you were cut off from everything else. You know? There's nobody else like that. There's nobody else like that.
We are the fucking Indians that they found here. And in order to make us not rebel crazily, they made us think we was from somewhere else. Now, what? Listen. You get here, right? Columbus and them motherfuckers get here. Mm-hmm. They got guns and all of that, so they fucking subdue, you know, the older generation or whatever. But the older generation is always going to fight and always going to hold on to their shit. So you go to the next generation now, who doesn't know. We were talking about the disconnect before. Just in one generation, from you know what I mean? One generation, motherfuckers don't know who Big Daddy Kane is. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So imagine you got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 generations.
I could make the argument that black people are the only true Americans, and not to minimize Native Americans but they're native to the land that we call America. They're not Native American. They predate America. You can't be native to something that you predate. They are absolutely native to this land, but they're not Native Americans because they are not Americans. They've just been named that by America. You understand what I'm saying? But the only real cultural group that exists in America that has been born from America, of America, and in America, not culturally tied to another land before that, America, is black people. Every other cultural group immigrated to this land from somewhere else, and they brought their history and culture with them. African slaves were brought here, and their history and culture was erased for them, to where they had to birth and create an entirely new culture for themselves, often separated from their families, their children, anyone they knew, to be property of another human being. And out of that, they've born an entirely new identity, very specific and exclusive to this land, with no ties to any other landmass. No one else has had to do this in this country. And I think part of the reason that you have to call us African Americans is because you don't know what else to call us. We have no ties to Africa. You ask any black person anywhere in this country, and they'll tell you they have no ties to Africa. They don't know no Africans. They don't know where they come from in Africa. And a handful of people who have done like a 23andMe to find out, they developed that as an adult. They didn't grow up with African traditions and customs. Shit, the closest we've ever seen is Kwanzaa. And most people still don't even know what the fuck that translates to. Black people are the true Americans, which is wildly ironic when you consider how this country treats us, and how the immigrants, the European immigrants, even the black immigrants, the African, the Caribbean immigrants treat us, is wild, considering that we are the true Americans. And that doesn't even count the fact that we fucking built this country. Black people are the last people on earth you need to be talking to about fucking what it means to be American.
Black people was already here. That's a bald-faced lie. He didn't discover no America. And the ship got in troubled water. Mm-hmm. And them black men was already here. Mm-hmm. The black people was already here. So they went out in that ocean and rescued Columbus off that ship. Mm. But they didn't have no knowledge, no learning or nothing. Mm-hmm. And then he came here and he put him into slavery. It saved his life. Mm. But he's a bald-faced lie. When he said he discovered America, that's a bald-faced lie. If my black relative didn't went out there and to rescue his butt, when that the turbulence was tearing up them ships, he wouldn't have been here. Mm. So black people didn't know. All they knew was living off the land, and they didn't know how to fight for themselves. Right. He put the black people into slavery, and the big old giant. My grandfather was tall, and he wasn't afraid of nothing, nobody, white or black, short or tall, fat or thin. He wasn't afraid of nothing.
Mm-hmm. What was your grandfather's name?
John Jordan. Everybody call him Johnny. John Jordan. Put the black people into slavery, and they got tight, and they fought their way out. They fought their way out of.
Watch the way you talk to me. People of African descent have been in the United States of America since 1619. How are you confused? You're confused. There is no United States in 1619, baby. The United States Constitution was formed in 1787. So if you are a person of color and you have traced yourself to 1619, I'm asking you a question. You said you've been in America from 1619. That's America, not the United States, because there is no United States. If you've been in America that long, does that make you an original person of America, or does that make you a racial group of Africa? Before you answer, I want to remind you that even those with African descent, because you are not the people who arrived here off of that boat, baby, then people are dead. You are the American children born of her womb. So even if the greatest ancestors of yours has African descent, you are American soil born. You didn't come from Africa, then people are dead. You are the original people of North.
Only the black-skinned people here, those who are ancestral here, that were thousands of years, have been here.
I would like to start off by saying you're not going to want to miss this. At the 80th session of the UN General Assembly in September 2025, President Gustavo Petro of Colombia asserted black people are ancestral to the American continent for thousands of years. To be exact, he said in his own words, 20,000 years, predating the transatlantic slave trade. His statement challenged conventional historical narratives and linked the denial of pre-Columbian black presence to ongoing racism and policies of domination in the Americas. Not only that, down there at the bottom you could see that he explicitly stated, only the black-skinned people here, those who are ancestral here for thousands of years, have been here. This statement validates historical claims that challenge the dominant all natives are Mongoloid. Wow.
I am not an African American, I'm an American. I am a Black American. How long does a bloodline have to live in one land before they are considered a pure species of that land? Meaning, how long did my people have to be in America to say, hey, no, we're American, compared to some people who are English American, who are Irish American, who are German American from their ancestors, but they get to call themselves American. There's nothing wrong with being African American, but a true African American is someone that is from Africa and moved here, either first generation or second generation, and has a tie to that country that I do not have. One of the first census in Virginia that allowed for Black people to have a name was somebody from my family. So that means they were there long before.
So when people say Black folks were in America first, they're not always talking about one single moment. They are talking about layers of history that were minimized or erased, including Africans arriving in the Americas as early in the year 1500s, and also Black explorers, sailors, and laborers present before the US existed. Africans who helped build the economic foundation of the colonies, Black presence that predates many European immigrants groups. So when some white Americans say that Black people are the true Americans, they mean that Black people did not come seeking America. Instead, America was built on the Black presence. So it means they were in America before America itself existed. They took part in the building of America. They took part in the birth of America. So meaning they came to America first before anything else. So this is not happening by accident, because several things are colliding at once. Let's talk about the DNA ancestry testing revealing deeper timelines, declassified records and expanded historical research, Black scholars reclaiming erased narratives and history, and younger white Americans questioning sensitized history. Now, for the first time, many are realizing that the story of who belongs was never neutral, but it was political. And that realization is uncomfortable. Now, here's the undeniable truth that even critics admit. No Black labor, no economic foundation. No Black resilience, no national survival. No Black culture, no American identity. Meaning, Black Americans are the culture of America. From agriculture to infrastructure, from music to language, from military services to civil rights, Black people didn't just contribute to America. They defined America itself. So when white Americans say Black people are the true Americans, it's less about replacing anyone and more about acknowledging the reality and the truth. So if Black people are recognized as foundational, not supplemental, then certain myths collapse. The myth of rightful ownership, the myth of moral superiority, the myth that Black people are perpetual outsiders. And acknowledging the Black primacy in America forces a deeper question that who really built America and who merely claimed it? And that's why the truth was delayed. That's why it was softened, and that's why it was buried. Now, this conversation is not saying that indigenous people don't matter, immigrants don't belong there, or history is simple. It simply says that Black Americans are not guests in America. Instead, they are the pillars. They are the foundational. They are the first people before America itself existed. They took part in the birth of America. So the pillars don't ask for permission to exist. So black Americans don't ask for permission, or they don't plead to exist. So when white Americans begin confessing uncomfortable truth, it's not weakness, but it is history correcting itself. Black people were in America before the flag was formed, before the anthem was even made, before the myth was even created, and no amount of rewriting history can change that fact. So let me ask my good people, do you believe that American history has been deliberately sanitized? What does it really mean to be an American?